This is Afghanistan, a country that slipped out of the headlines. But life here hasn't stopped. The checkpoints are orderly, the bombings have almost disappeared. The Taliban say they've ended a 40-year war.
دریم له ټولو نه ډېره مهم موضوع دا چې افغانستان وران شوی و په 40 کاله جګړه کې پرله پسې افغانان د جګړو ورانیو سره مخ وو.
For the first time in decades, there's quiet. And thanks to influencers, that version of Afghanistan is now finding a global audience.
It feels very peaceful. It doesn't feel like it's dangerous.
But what's going viral isn't the full reality. This is the most repressive place on earth for women. Millions of people are dying. Aid is drying up, and the world has largely walked away. I've spent months trying to get in, and now I'm finally here. I'm Meghna Bali, and for the next 9 days I'll be reporting from here on the ground in Afghanistan, a place the world rarely gets to see up close anymore. It's still one of the most tightly controlled places in the world to report from. But we're here. We'll be speaking with the Taliban and, more importantly, the people who live under their rule, to show you what life is really like in Afghanistan. For 20 years, the US and its allies fought to keep the Islamist militant Taliban out of power.
Thanks to our military and our allies and the brave fighters of Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is coming to an end.
Billions were spent. Thousands died. Then, in August 2021, it all collapsed almost overnight. Foreign troops pulled out, the government fell, and the Taliban walked back in.
Taliban fighters have taken down the flag of Afghanistan.
The scenes we're seeing in Afghanistan, they're gut-wrenching. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated.
These scenes from Kabul airport shocked the world. I'm travelling to that same airport now, but this time it's quiet. Most foreigners are gone. Embassies closed, journalists exited, donors and aid plummeted, unable to work with a regime infamous for its brutality.
The Taliban have demonstrated their contempt for human rights and fundamental freedoms of women and girls.
While some of the most vulnerable, including women, persecuted minorities, and those who worked alongside US forces, were able to flee, the majority of Afghanistan's 42 million people had no choice but to stay. I want to know what happened to them and what this country looks like under Taliban rule. So, after a 90-minute flight, I'm in Kabul. It's my first full day in Kabul. It's the weekend here, and the city is buzzing. Markets are packed, street food is sizzling, kids are running between stalls. And over again, I hear the same thing.
اقتصاد صحیح نداره دیگه تو مشکل نیست هزار نگاه
خدا باندې ډیر خوشاله استول سره غلې د پوسوي هم غلا ورکسوي د داتوګان ورکسوي د مستند نه دي جوړ سوي پوسوي
قدیما در قبلنا شلت و سوپ پیر بود ناراحتی بود حالا شکر خدا آرامی است وطن ما happy.
This optimism may seem surprising, but this is a country that hasn't known peace since the 1970s. They've seen a Soviet invasion, years of civil war, the rise of the extremist Taliban, the US-led invasion, a fragile republic, and finally, the sudden American withdrawal after 2 decades of war. So when the US forces withdrew in August 2021, they left behind Humvees like this in their rush to get out. And Taliban has actually left these bits of equipment littered across Kabul almost as if they're trophies. Security is no longer the defining issue in Afghanistan. It is a country in economic turmoil, but here in the streets of Kabul, life goes on. These freedoms, though, have come at a price. Decades of war have hollowed out the country's infrastructure. The Taliban's return to power has isolated the country from the West, cutting off most international funding and freezing billions of dollars in Afghan assets. Now, half the country depends on aid just to survive. Even basic staples are out of reach for many families.
Well, I'm safe, but my stomach is not safe.
Thank you very much. Okay. So this bread is a staple in all Afghan households. This will set them back about 50 Afghanis, which is close to $1. But there are some families that can't even afford this. Still, most of the people I meet tell me this life is better than before. But I'm acutely aware I'm yet to speak to one group of people whose freedoms have been systematically stripped under the Taliban's rule: women. Afghanistan is ruled by a deeply conservative emir, Haibatullah Akhundzada. He governs from Kandahar, the Taliban's spiritual and ideological heartland. And from there, his decrees carry the force of law, enforced across every corner of the country. In nearly 4.5 years of power, the regime has imposed more than 80 edicts, including bans on women working, being seen or heard in public, and the most devastating of them, a ban on education for girls over the age of 12. Together, they form what UN experts say amounts to gender apartheid. This is one of the most popular picnic spots in the capital, and a lot of Taliban members come here to spend their afternoons and evenings. Women aren't allowed to come into parks, so I've been given a special exception to be here. But I'm still getting a lot of looks from a lot of the men here. As a foreign woman, I'm tolerated here, but I'm clearly an anomaly. Men watch me from a distance, curious, but they're unwilling to approach me. So I go to them. Sir, look at him. Yeah. This bullet-toting guy's name is Naqibullah. He tells me he's a Taliban member and he works in the counter-narcotics ministry. Women are not allowed to go to school after grade 6. They're not allowed to work. There's many restrictions on women. So do you believe that those restrictions should be eased, especially if you want to create relations with the West? Notice how his language is hopeful, but there are no timelines or guarantees. I've heard this kind of official doublespeak over and over again here. Reassurances without committing to change. I've had my first meeting with a senior Taliban official. To be honest, it's left me quite stunned. Their views still remain deeply conservative. They don't think anything needs to change, and they just don't genuinely understand why so much of the West doesn't want to engage with them on their terms. But there are men here who think girls should be educated.
In Islam, so important. Every woman and man needs to be education education and they need to study everything the society needs.
خو داسې دی چې دا خو هم ضرورت خو دی اشد ضرورت دی طب ته او دا د فقهي مسله هم ده چې کله چې زنانه ډاکټر یي نارینه ډاکټر ته ضرورت نشته او په هر منطقه کې فرض کفایي ده چې یو زنانه ډاکټره باید اوسیږي.
But there are many men who openly align with the Emir's ultra-conservative ideology.
خپل ښځې راځه زه اوس تا ورولم زما کور ته سره زنانه شته هغه زما د کور والا سره دا چا سره چې په قسم باندې ووایي چې په قسم ته زه تا ته وایم ستا زړه غواړي هغه به وایي چې نه.
Standing here, it's hard to know what to believe. We hit the markets, but most women won't speak to me. Not because they don't want to, but because it's too dangerous. Of the few who do agree, most speak cautiously. We want to find out what life is like for women right now in Afghanistan. Are you happy living here?
آواز دیدم ما بگم کسی اینجا شاید تحت امنیت باشیم یا ما شاید که جانی ما در خطر بیفتم.
Many of the women who once protested these rules aren't here anymore. They fled. Over the last few months, I've spoken to a few who escaped to Pakistan and Iran. One was a female judge and activist who defended women and children's rights and prosecuted Taliban fighters before 2021. We've been speaking over text. She says she was hunted, tortured and threatened by Taliban members she once sentenced in court. I've heard this fear expressed by so many women and repressed minorities. They miss their old lives, but they're too afraid to return. For more than 4 decades, Afghans have fled their country, escaping war, political upheaval, economic collapse, and recurring humanitarian crises. Almost 90% of the world's 6 million Afghan refugees now live in neighbouring Iran or Pakistan. But over the past year, both countries have forced more than 2 million people back, citing security concerns and economic strain, including a 22-year-old woman from the persecuted Shia Hazara minority I met in Islamabad last August. I ask both women if I can meet them in Kabul. They never respond.
I spent 7 days living with the Taliban to find out if they truly are as dangerous as we've been taught.
Kind of want a picture with the Talib. Assalamu alaikum, sir. I'm gonna be pen pals with the Talib.
America, we have one message for you.
Welcome to Afghanistan.
Online, Afghanistan is being rebranded. Scroll through YouTube and it can look like the world's hottest new travel destination.
One of the sickest campsites in the world.
It feels very safe, to be honest.
This isn't the Maldives. This isn't Hawaii. This is Afghanistan.
The Taliban has openly courted influencers and tourists, trying to soften its image. But reporting here is very different. Operating as a journalist here is extremely challenging and it's a constant negotiation. We were able to get in easily, but we need a series of permissions to cross provinces or to shoot just about anywhere. And the authorities want to know where we're going, how long we're going to be there for, and what we're actually doing. We're constantly being watched, especially to make sure we're not filming women. And the further we travel from Kabul, the tighter the rules become. Are we exiting Kabul?
Yeah.
Basically, there's security at all the exit points of the city.
Yeah.
Okay. We're on our way east to Kunar, one of the provinces devastated by a deadly earthquake in August. 4 months on, reaching it is still difficult. As we drive through the Mahipar mountains, our phone signal drops out. We're stopped at a checkpoint. I go outside to show my passport. Then I'm pulled aside. What's he saying?
He says that ask you to go to the car.
Okay. And can you ask him the reason for that?
He just said it's bad.
So far in Kabul, we haven't had this experience. There seemed to have been some sort of exception for foreigners, but we're in a very different part of the country right now. And from everything we've learned, it's a way more conservative part of the country. I'm slightly on edge in this part of the country. It's beautiful, but I feel like I'm constantly being watched. Cameras are such a rare occurrence here in Afghanistan that every time we pull it out, we're usually greeted by a security guard with a pretty intimidating weapon. Eventually, we reach our destination, Patton Camp. So they wanted to send one of their guys with us? With the gun? No way. The point isn't to manufacture it, the point is to get people to speak the truth about what they're feeling. In August, a magnitude 6 earthquake struck this province, killing more than 2,000 people. Villages across these valleys were almost completely destroyed, and thousands of the survivors are now living here. I want to see how the recovery's going. This is Hazrat Azim. He lost 39 relatives, including his father and brother. It's been 4 months since the quake, but conditions here are only getting worse. Houses are still in ruins, people are dealing with PTSD, and health workers say kids are getting sick with pneumonia, diarrhea, and measles. In one tent, we meet Baspanda and her 3-year-old son. His twin brother died from the cold just weeks before the earthquake. She said, Now it's only just the beginning of winter, but the temperatures are really starting to bite here. I've been told by families that 4 blankets aren't even enough to keep them warm. Children are developing respiratory illnesses. I've just met a family. They've been here for about 3 months and there's no hope that their houses will be rebuilt at this stage. They don't have any money, no livelihoods. It's just an absolutely terrible situation. And there's about 8,000 people that are living in these sorts of temporary shelters. I want to go further into the mountains to see the conditions of the impacted villages. I'm riding in with a counsellor named Shafika. She's one of just 3 female health workers allowed to work in the village we're going to. Under Taliban rule, women are barred from most jobs, but aid work is a rare exception. But Shafika and her colleagues can only work here if they're accompanied by a male guardian. She tells me the challenges are worth it because these quake survivors need help.
او هغه په څه باندې چې کار کوو هغه مریضان چې دغه بحران سره مخ شوي دي او لکه د هغې سره مریضانو سره کینو د هغې سره خبرې کوو په هغې.
We're here and it's quite confronting. This is Indepth. Even before the earthquake, Indepth was a difficult place to live in. There were no roads and it could only be reached by foot. Food is scarce and the health clinics are hours away. So when the quake struck, the only way to rescue people initially was by helicopter. I'm told more than 100 people died. As we walk through, I see men telling women to go back inside their tents. They're not allowed to speak to us. In villages like this, strict social rules mean women rarely interact with men outside their family. For many, seeing a female health worker is the first time they've ever been able to talk openly about their own bodies and health.
خو بیا داسې دی چې موږ زنانې دا زموږ په حال پوهېږي زموږ درد او هر څه موږ دې ته شو ویلی سړو ډاکټرانو ته موږ نشو داسې ویلی چې یا ښه دي یا بد دي کوم مشکلات لرو کوم دغه سره موږ مخ یو.
See the scale of destruction here. This used to be a village and now a lot of these houses have just been razed to the ground. You can see these giant boulders here and I keep getting told not to go further back. This is the roof of a house and could still collapse at any moment. The village head tells me his people are desperate. The little aid they've received is about to finish. Doctors tell me their makeshift clinic is only funded for another 3 months and funding for food will run out even sooner.
شو هغه بس د یخنۍ د لاسه هغه خواران مړه شول نور هم همدا سپین ږیري خلک دي څه زخمیان دي چې دلته خیمو کې هغوی وخت نشي تېرولی ساعت په ساعت کلینیک ته ورځي نو همدغه کلی دی دغه کوټې دي دا ساحې ټولې ختمې شوي دي ویجاړې شوي دي.
It's pretty clear the world has moved on from Afghanistan. Since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, international aid has dried up, squeezed by other global crises and by deep discomfort with a regime that openly represses women and girls. But while donor money has disappeared, the politics around Afghanistan are shifting. Russia is the only country that has formally recognised the Taliban, but countries like China, Iran, Pakistan and the Gulf states are quietly re-engaging, and India has recently hosted Taliban officials in its capital, driven by regional stability, economic interests, humanitarian access and a desire to counter Pakistan's influence.
As a contiguous neighbour and a well-wisher of the Afghan people, India has a deep interest in your development and progress.
But none of this has actually made life easier for ordinary Afghans. In fact, some of the few safety nets people relied on are now disappearing. For decades, when things got unbearable inside Afghanistan, people crossed the border, mainly into Pakistan and Iran, to find work, safety, or just a way to survive. Now, those doors are shut too. Relations between Pakistan and the Taliban have sharply deteriorated in the last few years. Islamabad accuses Afghanistan's rulers of sheltering militants from the Pakistani Taliban, known as the TTP. That's led to rising tensions, a hardening stance from Pakistan, and in the last few months, cross-border strikes. At the same time, Pakistan has been enforcing a sweeping deportation campaign. Millions of Afghans are being forced back across the border, many with no jobs, no homes, and no support waiting for them. Iran has followed the same path, accelerating its own expulsions. People are being pushed back into a country that's already struggling to cope. Then things got even worse.
As of today, the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, has been shut down.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio said America's foreign assistance will now be limited and targeted.
When Donald Trump returned to the White House last January, one of his first moves was to freeze large parts of America's foreign aid. He said the programs didn't serve US interests. That decision tore a massive hole in Afghanistan's already fragile health system. More than $1.7 billion worth of American aid contracts supporting dozens of programs in the country were cut. The consequences have been brutal. More than 400 health facilities have now been suspended or closed, leaving millions without care.
Firing individuals has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children.
That's false. That's fake.
The US strongly disputes claims that aid freezes have contributed to child deaths. But on the ground, Afghan health workers say the impact is impossible to ignore. They say funding cuts have intensified pressure on already overstressed hospitals and clinics. In a Kabul hospital, we meet Usmania. She's 2 years old, and fighting for her life. She's critically ill, suffering from severe malnutrition and multiple infections. Usmania has developed dermatitis, pneumonia and asthma. She's no longer able to feed herself. Instead, doctors and mothers deliver nutrition through a tube up to 7 times a day. In the bed beside her is 5-month-old Lela. Cases like these now fill the ward.
There are 10 beds in this critical care unit, and as you can see today, every single one of them is occupied. In the last 6 months, staff here have treated more than 200 children, and when emergencies surge, they can place up to 3 children in a single bed.
The UN estimates 3.7 million Afghan children are malnourished. 1.7 million are at risk of dying.
That was pretty confronting, listening to the stories of these women and why their children have ended up here, and I think the most striking thing is how preventable all of this is.
I wanted to ask the Taliban directly what they're doing to address the crisis engulfing Afghanistan. Their chief spokesman agreed to a rare sit-down interview, under strict conditions. We're not allowed to appear together in the same frame, because I'm a woman.
ولې تاسې پوهېږئ چې په یو هېواد کې جګړه تېره سي هغه جنګ ځپلی وي هلته اقتصاد او د اقتصاد منابع ټول له منځه ځي. افغانستان هم 40 کاله د جګړې شاهد و دا طبیعي ده چې موږ ډېر شاته پاتې یو په اقتصادي لحاظ.
So many international donors refuse to donate to Afghanistan because of your own policies, especially around these restrictions on women. Don't you think easing those restrictions would unlock more aid? Is it not irresponsible of your government to cling to policies that are costing Afghan lives, especially babies?
په دې معنا د افغانستان قوانین مراعات کړي د افغانستان کې اصول او ارزښتونه په پام کې ونیسي بل دا ده چې هغه زمان کې دوی کومکونه کول او خوښ وو.
Mr. Mujahid, you've repeatedly said that the Islamic Emirate needs to create the right atmosphere for girls to go back to school. It's now been 4 years. When will girls start to go back to school beyond grade 6?
زه فکر کوم د دې لپاره ښه ده چې هغه ارګانونه چې د دې کار مسؤلیت لري هغوی د باره کې ځواب ووایي چې خپل کار یې کوم چې ته رسولی. موږ د معارف وزارت لرو د عالي تحصیلاتو وزارتونه که تاسې دا پوښتنه له هغو سره شریکه کوي چې هغوی خپل کار کوم چې ته رسولی ده بیا کېدای شي دقیق ځواب ووایي.
So do you acknowledge that young girls, young women are suffering because of this ban on education?
طبیعي ده هغو غوښتنه یې ده د هغو غوښتنه ده هیله یې ده او موږ هم امید لرو چې دا ستونزه په مناسب وخت کې حل شي.
The answers are familiar. Promises, deflection, no timelines. 4 years on, little has changed. This is what life is like in Taliban-run Afghanistan. It's heartbreaking, it's complicated, it's surprising, and it's full of resilience. I felt really safe here. The Afghans are hospitable and friendly people. Many tell me that they're happy and that there's stability, but the people here are suffering. There's an urgent economic and humanitarian crisis, and the Afghans are demanding that girls should be allowed to go to school. But the experiences, the restrictions, the ways of life, the access to resources, they all differ from province to province, and there's a lot to rebuild. This is stability, but it's not freedom. And for millions of Afghans, it's not enough.